welcome to Boot Camp Session 3. Thanks for joining us as we journey together into Bible territory. On our previous recce through the Bible book of Genesis, we discovered that God made and formed the world as a place for people to enjoy a special relationship with Him under His rule, protection and blessing. The people God created, though, were tempted to doubt His character. Instead, they grabbed at the ability to rule their own lives and set their own terms, just as we all have done ever since. But God stayed committed to His purpose and promised a man whom He renamed Abraham, which means a father of many, that he would have a family from which a descendant would come who would bring people back into a place of blessing under God's rule and protection. This is what happened next.
Eventually, Abraham's family ends up exiled down in Egypt. From here, the family grows, and we're introduced to the Torah's other main character, Moses. God raises him up to rescue the Israelites and bring them to a mountain where they're all invited into a covenant relationship with God. They're given 613 terms of the relationship, guidelines for becoming new kinds of humans who will faithfully represent God to the world. And Moses brokers this whole deal because he's awesome. He's the ultimate prophet who speaks God's word to Israel. He's a priest who represents them before God. And he's even called a king, Israel's leader and deliverer in time of need. But as the Torah progresses, the Israelites fail big time. They violate the covenant, and even Moses rebels against God. In fact, the Torah ends with Moses predicting that Israel's failure will continue as they go back into the Promised Land, and they're going to end up in exile once again. But he has hope that God will fulfill his promise to rescue Israel. One day he will cover for their failures. He'll heal their selfish hearts so they can truly love God and live. And then Moses dies.
The book of Exodus and the 3 books that follow it show us what the one like Moses who was still to come, the descendant promised to Abraham, would be like and what he would achieve. God calls Moses to rescue his people. After 400 years in Egypt, they have become subject to bitter slavery. The one to come would rescue people from the harsh masters that rule their lives. Moses brings God's message to the Egyptian Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And its authority is confirmed with miraculous signs. The one who is to come would bring God's message of release and do miraculous wonders. Under Moses, the people have to slaughter a perfect lamb, so the firstborn boy of each of their families would not be killed, as God brings punishment on those who are rejecting his authority. The one to come would be a lamb that would die, so all who trust in his sacrifice on their behalf could escape the punishment of death. Moses receives and communicates the laws that show what life lived at God's standard looks like. The one to come would be able to keep those laws and give that kind of life as a gift to all who will receive it from him. Moses mediates the covenant between God and his rescued people. "You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Having been brought close to him, God's people would be ministers of his blessing in the world. But even after such miraculous displays of God's power and character, having been led out of slavery, having God's own presence in their midst, and having been blessed with unique identity and purpose, when God brings this people to the land he had promised, they are too scared to go in. So God walks them round and round in the desert for 40 years to learn what being his people really means. Again, the promise is partially fulfilled. Only the one to come, Jesus, would be able to completely fulfill it and bring all who put their faith in him close to the Father, to be blessed by him and bring his blessing to the world.